What's going on, my Weldtube family? Welcome back. Today's lesson, we're doing a titanium tutorial on 2-inch schedule weighted pipe. I'm not good at titanium or aluminum. I've never even tried it before, so I got somebody very, very special today, Dr. Travis Field, right? So usually we do API 1104, carbon, stainless, Inconel, but when it comes to titanium or aluminum, I'm not special at that at all. So let me page Dr. Travis, see if I can get him in here. Paging Dr. Travis. Paging Dr. Travis, I need you here, man. I need you for some surgery on some titanium. Travis, I wonder if he's slow-mo walking again for an entrance.
One, two, one, two, one, two, one, two.
Where are you? Dude, have you seen Travis, bro? I paged him like 5 minutes ago. I mean,
Man, I don't know, man. I think I saw him earlier.
oh, is he slow motion walking again?
He was showing off his boots over there, I think.
He's always wanting an entrance, huh? Slow motion. Man, Travis hasn't came yet, brother. I think we're gonna have to either get another surgeon because this is ridiculous. It really is.
Sorry guys, I was talking to girls, you know, checking out my nice square body style toes right here, you know. Ooh, they get me so nervous. You want a Red Bull?
Travis, where you been, brother? Are we gonna get to this tutorial? What, man? People are waiting.
What you guys got going on here?
We're about to do some titanium, brother. I know that you're really good at this, so.
Nice.
I heard you're the best of the best.
My imaginary watch says it's, you know, coffee time. Sorry guys.
Coffee time. Travis.
Come on, Travis.
Travis, man. All right, Weldtube family, welcome back. Travis decided to come back after his coffee break. I'm glad y'all liked that skit in the intro. But anyways, Travis, I appreciate you coming. You're all the way from where? Where did you come from?
I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Alberta, Canada. Flew in all the way over here.
Oh, terrible. It's like -20 outside. There's no ice caps, they glues.
Is it -20?
Yeah, oh yeah.
-20 degrees over there in Canada right now. Are you kidding me? So right now in Texas, it's about 60 degrees. So you're probably sweating in your clothes.
Oh, it's nice. Nice here. I might live here.
He said he might live here.
That's the reason why I took a one-way flight, because I wasn't actually going to go back to Edmonton. I was going to stay here.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, wow, wow. Well, Travis, I appreciate you coming, man. I love your work. I've been watching your work since I barely started welding, bro. Like, you've been one of my inspirations growing, and you're still my inspiration. Again, this is Abraham, our lead instructor as well here. I mean, me and him, we don't know how to weld titanium. We never have. We have tried a little here and there with Travis when he got here, but as far as titanium and aluminum as well, which will be further, this is new for us. So we're the students right now. He is the instructor, he is the teacher, and we're gonna let him take it from there. What do you do, Travis? What is your expertise as far as welding is concerned?
Well, essentially in Alberta, Canada there, I'm a RIG welder. I weld specifically pipe at different metals. So I weld carbon, chrome, stainless, duplex, nickel alloys, titanium, aluminum. And I also have pipeline, fabbing, F3F4. As long as it's pipe and it doesn't matter what weld process and what material it is, I weld it.
Everything.
So pretty much he made us look bad. That's pretty much what it was. That's what it was. Outstanding, outstanding, outstanding. This guy is really, really good. I can't wait. A lot of people have been asking for this tutorial too. And I'm gonna let you take it from here, Travis. What are we gonna do next, man? I mean, you're the instructor now, we're the students. We wanna learn, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right, Weldtube family, we're here back with Travis again. What do we got here, Travis? We got these things in our hands, me and Abraham. Abraham has a titanium pipe, an aluminum pipe, wire brush, and I got this stuff over here. What is all this for? Lead it out the way.
Basically with titanium, it's a very theory-based metal, but the purpose of the video here is to give a little bit of a demonstration for the viewer understands the welding of titanium, that it is a very different material than other metals, and it welds differently than other metals. So it encourages and inspires the viewer to think for themselves that maybe I want to weld that too. So they'll go to a welder testing training facility and learn how to do it too. So it doesn't necessarily give a lot of the information away to the viewer, but it's a means to give a individual an idea of what is involved with this metal. And because this is a very theory-based metal, you take the troubleshooting and the theory and you apply it to other metals such as carbon, stainless, duplex, nickel alloys, and etc.
Nice.
Now, when it came to this specific metal, the training facility I go to is called GRB College of Welding, and the owner is named Jerry. And he's been welding since 1967, so he's been welding for over 50 years. And I've known him since November of 2008. And he's seen me at my very worst, teaching me first how to even weld on 6010 route, 718. And he's taught me everything from stainless stick route, sanitary tubing, carbon TIG, stainless, duplex, nickel alloys, titanium, aluminum, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm missing out here.
Insane.
But when I took the titanium course, about 5 or 6 years ago, and it actually, since it is a theory-based metal, what I learned, even though the viewer may or may not be welding titanium in the near future, the value of this video is that you learn the theory that you apply to other metals. And for example, when it comes to titanium, there's 3 troubleshootings. If you fall back on these 3 troubleshootings, you will be able to weld titanium. And you'll also be able to apply this theory to other metals and weld other metals to the high quality of titanium. You have heat input, and you could also include calculations, but also welding techniques. Quite often, especially in welding procedures, you'll take amperage times voltage times the time that you're welding to, divided by the distance that you traveled within, say, 60 seconds a minute, and you get the amount of joules that you expelled into the material. That is quite often used for welding procedures. And the root pass will have a different amount of joules expelled into the material, the hot pass, the cap pass, fill pass, etc.
The joules is energy, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, energy. Joules are energy. That's what it is. Okay.
And if a person wants to be very specific, they can also change their welding technique where they can expel certain amounts of energy to get over a distance. Say, for example, on titanium, the fill pass, I was shown a technique where you can have the foot pedal down, you can have the filament as a lay wire, and you can give a surge of current. It washes the weld puddle out, and then you can drop the current, keep the higher frequency on. But you keep the higher frequency on so that it does not leave any pinholes, it doesn't shut the arc off. But then you move to a leading edge, you give another surge of current. Overall, you can travel a fair distance, and that technique will limit the amount of heat input you expel into the material, and you can get a lot of metal deposition into the material over a distance. And in comparison to what you would be if you had the arc continuously on, and you're traveling from A to B, so you actually cut down on the amount of energy you expel into the material, but you get more deposition.
Nice. Too much joules.
Too much joules can influence and affect the mechanical, chemical, and other properties of the material.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But also joules comes also, all of these 3 are in conjunction with one another. We'll be talking about purge quality and parts per million of oxygen. When it comes to this material, we have essentially you want 25 parts per million and less. And what this basically means is the purge quality and parts per million is that in the atmosphere we have oxygen. And as the metal elevates in temperature, and depending on the temperature that the metal is at, when the atmosphere is allowed to interact with the metal as it elevates in temperature, the metal protects itself and forms an oxide layer. And depending on the temperature that the metal is at, and depending on how much oxygen or how many parts per million of oxygen are within the atmosphere that is interacting with the metal as it's at an elevated temperature, the material starts to form oxides, and different thickness of oxides depending on how hot it is, and depending on how many parts per million of oxygen is interacting with it.
Okay. So you're saying that the amount of oxygen affects my color of my weld?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So essentially, if for example, if this is stainless steel, and this is where you apply the theory and the techniques, if this is stainless steel and I'm welding from A at 3 o'clock up to B at 12 o'clock, and I'm traveling, once the deposit of metal leaves the inert gas of the ceramic cup, it starts to oxidize with the atmosphere. And so if this is my ceramic cup right here, and I'm traveling, I'm leaving a lot of deposit metal, and now it is allowed to interact with the atmosphere. So depending on how much parts per million of oxygen are in the atmosphere, and depending on what the temperature, and also what kind of welding technique and how much heat and energy I'm expelling into material, leads to how hot the material is going to be when it does interact with the atmosphere. It depends on how thick of an oxide and what coloration I'm going to get.
Okay.
And
I never knew that. I always thought just my color was affected by my heat.
Yeah.
I always thought that.
Oh, it does. That's the reason why we're using a trailing shield. Now I also want to mention that with titanium, another technique that Jerry at GRB College of Welding had taught me was that you can take a single individual ceramic cup, you could make one ripple at a time, and you can protect that for about 6, 7, 8 seconds. That will protect it away from the atmosphere. Then you can move to the leading edge and you can make another ripple with a surge of current, drop the current, you can protect that ripple for about 8 seconds. Around 6 seconds, the redness of the color will dissipate and then it'll turn silver. It takes about another 2 seconds for it to be completely silver. It is not hot enough to interact with the atmosphere to form oxides. And because I have a less than 25 parts per million within the TIG torch, the gas from the bottle, from the argon there, there's not enough oxygen to interact with the metal as it's at an elevated temperature, so my metal under less than 25 parts per million is going to come out silver.
Okay, so without this, you're saying that you can wait 8 seconds.
Yeah.
And go. If you can't afford, if you can't get this, the shielding cup, correct?
Yep, trailing shield.
A trailing shield. Okay. If you don't have this there, and you're gonna do titanium or whatever the case may be,
yeah,
you're gonna have to wait 8 seconds.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can move up and keep going.
Like essentially, it doesn't have to necessarily be 8 seconds per ripple. It depends. It all depends on how much energy you expel into each individual ripple.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I had, yeah. So if I, oh, it is. It takes a while. Yeah. But if I put my foot pedal down and I hold it for a couple seconds, or if my machine's at say 200 amps. Usually when it gets up to the temperature, if it's a lower overall input on the machine and I give a surge current, it's going to come up, ramp up slowly, and it's going to expel more energy and joules into make that one specific ripple. Whereas if I have the machine set to 350 amps and I give the surge of current, that my input is going to be instantly, it's going to wash that ripple out instantly, and I can drop the current to keep the higher frequency on. And it's going to protect that once it creates a ripple, I can drop it down, and because it's expelled X amount of energy, less energy than it would have if I had the machine at 200 amps. It depends on how much energy you expel into the material that you need to protect each individual ripple for X amount of time, depending on the amount of energy you expel into it.
All right, that makes sense.
Oh, and also with the trailing shield here, essentially all deposited metal on titanium, I don't necessarily now, since I have the trailing shield on here, I can just keep the arc continuously on if I want to. I can pulsate it, I can do whatever I want with it, but I can weld say from 12 or 6 o'clock to 3 o'clock if I wanted to, and I could weld it all the way up, and that all deposited metal is now protected with the trailing shield. And this has, you want a trailing shield of less than 25 parts per million of oxygen.
This is, where can you get this at? Huntington Fusion?
Huntington Fusion. And also Huntington Fusion on Instagram.
Okay.
This is also...
What is that?
Actually, I'll give you this back here. Yeah. This device here is a purge monitor. This is also Huntington Fusion, and there are different models of purge monitors. This is a Purge i300. This purge monitor reads in parts per million of oxygen, so it's 999 parts per million and less. So if you have 1,000 parts per million, it does not register because it is out of the reading, because this specific purge monitor is very, very intricate and very precise. Okay. So it's, it'll read, say, 10 parts per million, 11 parts per million, 12 parts per million, 13 parts per million. It's very precise. Whereas if you can also get other models, such as a IP100 handheld, Huntington Fusion, it's a 100, it's a handheld monitor. That reads in percentage. That is not as accurate as this specific model, which this specific model is meant to be for these particular materials, okay, including duplex, nickel alloys, that read in very intricate parts. But
what would other models be used for? I mean, like let's say you have a different model. Would another model fit another type of pipe, size pipe?
Well, the IP65 Purge i100, the handheld monitor, that reads in not parts per million, but it reads in percentages, and it gives the user an idea. So it'll read from, say if you're welding a 24 or 30 inch stainless steel pipe, a SKED 10 stainless, yeah, and you turn your purge on and you want to know what kind of atmosphere, of how much percentage of argon is inside that pipe when you can start welding. You can walk up to the pipe and you can read the atmosphere of say 21% oxygen, down to 18, 17, 16 percentage, except it is not as accurate. So it'll read 0.01, which is 100 parts per million, 0.02, which is 200 parts per million, 0.03, and so on. That specific monitor is not going to tell you 125 parts per million, 126 parts per million. It's going to be 100. It's going to tell you 0.01, 0.02, 0.03.
300.
Yeah, but that is actually the most common, the most useful purge device, because you can use it for everything. And when it reads 0.00, that you're less than 100 parts per million.
Okay. Sweet. Okay, so what's next after this? See, again, guys and girls that are watching this, we are always learning. We don't know everything. So people claim that we know a lot, but in reality, we just know very little of what we know. Now, the titanium, aluminum, when it comes to this is a learning process for me and for Abraham as well. So this is I appreciate you, Travis. Keep going, brother.
And the very last thing, also within troubleshooting, we have heat input, we have purge quality, parts per million of oxygen, and we have cleanliness and oxide removal. And for example, this is aluminum. Aluminum has an oxide that melts at 3,700 degrees Fahrenheit. And oxygen, within the molecular structure, an oxide contains oxygen. And I'll get to that in a second here. This oxide, since it melts at 3,700 degrees Fahrenheit, when you brush the oxide off, the material underneath the oxide melts at 1220. Now this is aluminum, titanium.
Wait, hold that. I saw you brush into one direction.
Yeah, one direction.
Why is that?
Well, the reason being, since I spent a lot of time at GRB College of Welding, and I spent a lot of time talking to Jerry there, it's always a little intricate little details that he tells me. He has told me on aluminum, do not, in other metals, nickel alloys, stainless, whatever material you're welding, even carbon, chrome, don't go like this, because you brush the oxide off in one direction, and then because this is a very soft material, when you come back, it digs into the soft aluminum and it embeds the oxides into the material deeper.
Okay.
So
literally it's taking the oxides away, but then bringing it back more.
Yeah, and it puts them in deeper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's why I go to Jerry at GRB College of Welding all the time.
It's nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Makes all the difference with little details.
Yeah.
Oh yes. And the other thing with, I'll switch you over on titanium here. And the other thing with titanium here, titanium is not as familiar of the oxide. The oxide formation on aluminum is a lot more familiar. A lot more people know more about oxidization of the aluminum and the passivation layer that rapidly forms on aluminum. That's very common knowledge. Titanium is not as familiar because a lot of people do not deal with titanium. The oxide layer internally and externally needs to be removed. You use an emery cloth to remove the material.
That is emery cloth.
Actually, yeah. And you use all cold working means on, I'll get you just to rip that here. I can probably rip it. Oh, there we go.
There you go, nice.
And essentially, because you're cutting down on friction forms heat. So basically you're just kind of, you have an emery cloth going around and around, and it removes the oxide like that. You have inside here.
Somebody was like, man, I don't want to do that. I want to wire wheel it.
Oh, wire wheel? No, wire wheel just smears and smudges the oxides. Wire wheel adds heat because friction, heat, and then with the atmosphere rushing in while you're forming heat, it forms more oxides to protect the material.
So no grinder.
Nope.
Don't use a grinder. Don't use a 1/8 carbon disc. Don't use none of that. Always use your what you're using right here.
Essentially on titanium, use cold working means. Don't use a grinder, because a grinder it also hardens the material that you're grinding into, and also if you do a hardness test on the material that you have used the grinder on, it'll show that it's been hardened. But also with the friction from the grinder, friction creates heat. Yeah. It starts to oxidize, and it's going to embed oxides into the material. So when you weld over that material, you're going to have a lot of problems. Yeah. Now the oxide on here, because the oxide melts, well, it melts at a higher temperature than the base material here, but the oxide, the thing that needs to be known about the oxide is that the oxide contains oxygen. And if, for example, if I weld this and I did not remove the oxide layer externally and internally and off the bevel, regardless if I had, say, 10 parts per million, which is not enough oxygen to form any oxidization of the metal. So I have 10 parts per million on my TIG torch, 10 parts per million on my trailing shield, 10 parts per million internally as a backing gas. So I don't have any parts per million of oxygen, enough oxygen to interact with the metal as it elevates the temperature, so it's not going to oxidize. But because I did not remove the oxide layer, which contains oxygen, that oxygen on the oxide layer is now going to interact with my weld puddle, and it's going to form oxides.
Oh, understand.
So that's why you always remove the oxides, and that's why you use cold mechanical means to remove oxides, because you want to avoid any friction, which leads to heat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Okay.
What color am I looking for?
Yeah.
After let's say I do everything right, what color am I looking for?
Essentially, if you do everything right on titanium, including if you take this theory and knowledge that you apply to the other metals, stainless, duplex, super duplex, nickel alloys, etc. If you do everything properly, you follow your heat input, you follow proper purge quality, parts per million of oxygen, you follow proper cleanliness and oxide removal, you'll have, and also less than 25 parts per million, the deposit of metal will be silver and you'll have no heat tint. So everything will be silver without any heat tint, oxidization.
So dust, dirt, grease, fingerprints, and other contaminants lead to embrittlement and porosity when not properly cleaned. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So if my gloves are dirty right now, if I interact with the filler metal and that filler metal is now being consumed into the weld puddle, it starts to form. It contaminates the weld puddle.
And I can see after I get done welding, I would see a different size, a different color than silver.
Oh yes. Yeah. And sometimes, depending if the material has an oxide layer on it, sometimes you'll see, especially on aluminum and nickel alloys, you'll see a kind of a grayish, a skin or a film kind of floating around in the puddles. And I also want to mention when it comes to nickel alloys, whether it's like Monel, Inconel, Hastelloy, etc.
Yeah.
When you have less than 100 parts per million, you don't have enough oxygen inside there to interact with the weld puddle. Your weld puddle goes glossy, clean, shiny, clear. And when you start adding more oxygen into the material and your parts per million of oxygen gets lesser and lesser, then that's when you start having the formation of oxides, and your oxide is now interacting with the weld puddle and causing a lot of problems for you. Okay. And also titanium, since this cannot be seen from the camera, I'll read this out here. And this is also explains why we're using a trailing shield or any particular means to protect any deposit metal. Essentially titanium, anything that's heated up needs to be protected away from the atmosphere. That's, in short, that's the general how you do it. Okay. Titanium has a high efficiency for the absorption of trace elements from the atmosphere as low as 5,000 parts per million. That includes carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, which greatly influences and affects the chemical and mechanical properties of the metal, including ductility, toughness, and corrosion resistance.
All right, Travis, we said all these things, very informational, but pale yellow, straw yellow, all this right here, what is this as far as everything, the temperature, all that, what is that?
Essentially,
color-wise.
Basically, essentially with the different colors, these are a reflection of the different of the oxides, different thicknesses, nanometers.
Okay.
A thicker oxide will be a blue, dark blue. A thinner oxide will be a pale yellow. This is the temperature that the metal is at when it is allowed to interact with the atmosphere. Also, depending on how many parts per million of oxygen is in that atmosphere that is interacting with the metal when it's at that temperature.
Oh, okay, nice, nice, nice. See, very informational for sure. I mean, like this, me and Abraham, we did not know. So when he came in here telling us all this, we were just like, we're mind blown. Am I right? Yeah,
I learned a lot.
I learned a lot, right? So,
Learned a lot.
Travis, anything else you want to say about titanium, or just the basics of what we need to know right now?
Essentially on this is the basis of what a person needs to know.
Okay.
This is just, regardless, even though this is a titanium video, when you do apply the theory and knowledge, because titanium is a very cause and effect, it shows you exactly what you're doing wrong, and as long as you refer back to the troubleshooting, it can help you and it can fix itself.
So by applying this, by learning this, I can apply this to stainless, Inconel, like you said.
All alloys.
Yeah, that's correct.
All alloys.
Yeah, because when I took the course at GRB College of Welding and Jerry taught me titanium, showing me how to do these different metals, all the different metals, what I learned from that titanium course that Jerry offered was that I can use the theory and I can apply that to any other metal I want. Nice. Stainless, duplex, nickel alloys. Nice. And that actually made me a better welder because I understood why certain metals were oxidizing, and I understood about heat input techniques, and I understood about parts per million of oxygen, and I understood why I was having difficulty welding stainless, or why I was having difficulty welding nickel alloys. Because of parts per million of oxygen and cleanliness, and I could understand certain things. So even though this is a titanium welding video, and the viewer may or may not be welding titanium in the near future, this video is very handy because it lets a person know to take this theory and they can apply it to other metals.
Sweet. Okay, so for example, if I have two welds, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, don't use a wire wheel brush. If I have two welds,
yeah.
I'm about to cap. I have two of the same welds. I'm about to cap this weld. I'm about to cap this weld. If I use the wire wheel on one cap and I just hand brush the other cap, and I weld over that, the puddle will run more smoothly on top of the one I just used my hand brushed on.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
The reason being is because if you have a material, say is like a nickel alloy or stainless, if you use the buffing wheel, it leads to friction, leads to heat, but also smears and embeds the oxides deeper into the material. Whereas if you brush the oxides off with a normal stainless hand brush, that's cold means, and it removes the oxides without embedding them into the material and without adding more heat into the material. And when when there's any friction on the material and it increases heat, it starts to oxidize to protect itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense, right?
Makes a lot of sense.
I mean, so, alrighty, Travis, what else is there, man?
Well, the other thing I wanted to include here, and this is another reason why I spent a lot of time at GRB College of Welding with Jerry. I was actually there on the 27th and the 28th of November before I came here with the titanium and aluminum here. But one of the things I had a problem with was closing the root pass on titanium. Titanium, it forms an oxide on the tip of the fill metal, especially if it's allowed to interact with the atmosphere. We'll be using a size 12 ceramic cup to do this welding, and the reason why a size 12 ceramic cup is because I asked Jerry, when I'm trying to close this fill metal, it's like my mind is trying to dab them to the hottest point, but it's like don't shake, and you stick all over the place. Yeah. And I asked him, how do I weld this metal? How do I close the metal without it trying to stick everywhere? And he told me you need to find a way that does not, that the tip of the fill metal does not form an oxide in the first place, which when you form the oxide, it becomes very sticky and now it sticks to everything. Yeah. So in order to not form the oxide in the first place, you need to have the tip of the filler metal protected within the inert gas of your ceramic cup.
Okay. Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
Now, as far as your filler metal goes, do you have to clean that?
Yes. With titanium, you'll use an emery cloth, and you'll clean the emery cloth also in one direction. You don't want to go up and down. You just one direction. You got to think of it as well. Basically, you just spin it and just if this is my emery cloth, I just clean it like this, and then I take gasoline antifreeze, acetone, and I put it on a towel and I clean the filler metal. And same with the nickel alloys, stainless, duplex, super duplex, etc. I clean the material.
What antifreeze do you recommend? Hey, Ram, I think there's an antifreeze over there. Can we see how it looks?
When it comes to cleaning, now this is one form of gasoline antifreeze. This is what GRB College of Welding uses, but they have the little bottles that is more readily available at any gas station. You can get the little bottles. You could use acetone. You can use gasoline antifreeze. This is helpful for cleaning the material prior to welding, and because this material, aluminum, nickel alloys, stainless, titanium, will be cleaned with gasoline antifreeze, acetone, because you're removing any dust, dirt, grease, fingerprints, oils, or anything, cutting fluid, etc. Removing that off the material so it's clean to weld to. Also, if you have any tape residue, you can use a rubbing alcohol, even though it is flammable. It does remove tape residue because you'll be using tape you'll be using a backside of the tape to the sticky side of the tape, which the backside of the first tape, which is not sticky, goes against the weld area, and you want to keep away from the heat affected zone. But the tape residue, as the pipe does get hotter, it does heat up the tape, and that tape residue kind of starts sticking to the pipe. But the problem is that you want to remove that tape residue, because when you're brushing the weld zone and also the heat affected zone, you do not want any tape residue on your brush, which your brush now leads right to your weld zone and contaminates your weld zone. So I've found that rubbing alcohol is very efficient and handy to remove tape residue, which gasoline antifreeze and acetone may or may not.
Okay, nice. Any other questions right now before you start going on this titanium fit up and everything?
Well, the one thing I want to mention is that this video is just a demo. It's just a video to get the individual viewer interested in welding titanium. That this is something that they may like to get involved with and may like to pursue and get into in the future. There's going to be a South Coast Welding Academy that's going to be doing the titanium aluminum. That's in Houston, Texas, here in the States here, in Edmonton.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, and in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, the training facility that taught me how to weld from the very beginning is GRB College of Welding, and the individual you want to talk to is Jerry, and their website is grbwelding.com.
Oh, nice, nice, nice. So GRB and South Coast Welding Academy, we will be implementing aluminum and titanium in the new year. So I mean, we learned a lot just by Travis doing this, showing us all of this. But before he came to this, you know, we had about 2 days of practice while he was showing us, and we learned so much. So I appreciate you, Travis.
Also, it's even though in the industry, sometimes a person you have to be very careful and conscientious of passing on knowledge or showing others. I've always found that successful individuals they tend to want to help others. So I found these guys really great. They're very they teach their knowledge and training and everything, and they like to help out others because they themselves are successful. So they like to help others reach their potential, and that's also the reason why I'm rather informative, and I try to help others too, because I've always had Jerry at GRB College of Welding as a role model. I admire him, and I see him helping others because he builds up people around him. And because I admire that about him, and I want to be just like him and help others too. It's like monkey see, monkey do almost.
Yeah. That's right.
But because I admire, but because I admire what he does, that's why I'm here, and that's why I like to talk about welding and get other people involved into it. So overall, when it comes to these different metals, you want to find someone like South Coast Welding Academy, or if you're in Houston, Texas, or in the States, or if you're in Alberta, Canada, or in Canada in general, there's GRB College of Welding. That's where I go, and who has trained me from the very beginning. You want to find an individual who is optimistic, positive, who is successful themselves, and who likes to help others. That's who you want to go to, so that they can build you up and you can personally reach your own personal potential and your own personal goals. So what we may as well do now is we may as well start with the fit up. Right here at the moment, I'm just doing a couple tacks. Basically what I'm doing is I put the filler metal on the pipe material, and I give a little bit of energy, but you do not want to give too much energy because the internal of the pipe is not purged by an inert gas, so it's very susceptible to the atmosphere. So if I give a little bit of energy and just enough to where the filler metal, the weld puddle, just adheres to the pipe, I can drop the current, protect that deposit metal, and then carry on to create a bridge stack. And essentially here the biggest thing is always having the trailing shield. That's a Huntington Fusion trailing shield, but always have that properly around the pipe. Quite often while getting into position, I often just unscrew the trailing shield, adjust the trailing shield, adjust my hands, and then I can tighten up the trailing shield, so any movements I do with my hands, regardless of the movement and regardless of going around the pipe, I always have the trailing shields always at all times protecting the depositing metal. Now these two metals, titanium and aluminum, in Alberta, Canada, they are not very common metals. I probably weld more titanium in my garage, and same with aluminum. I probably weld more aluminum in my garage than I do actually welding titanium and aluminum. Most of our most common metals are carbon steel, chrome, stainless, some nickel alloys, duplex, super duplex, but mostly pipeline. But once you get to titanium and aluminum, that's not very common. Also, when you're welding, since titanium is in backfed, it's a little bit easier to backfeed it than it is to have the filament on the outside of the pipe, because it becomes very sticky. So when you backfeed, and it doesn't matter if it's titanium, it doesn't have to be just titanium, it could be stainless, nickel alloys, duplex, etc. If you have a very good quality of purge internally, like 25 parts per million and less, when you remove the filler metal, inspect the tip of the filler metal. If it's nice and silver and there's no heat tint, then it means that there's 25 parts per million or less. If there's like a light straw color, browns, blues, or purples, it gives you an indication of what the atmosphere internally inside the pipe is going to be, with how many parts per million of oxygen is inside the pipe. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just brushing the oxides off the weld zone and also the heat affected zone, and also on the ramp that leads into the root path. Essentially when it comes to practicing for this video, for the last
couple months I've been only strictly welding pipeline and chrome welding, and I think all I had for practice was maybe probably about 3 days on the titanium, 3 days on the aluminum, a day at GRB for the titanium, a day at GRB for the aluminum, and coming here for a couple days. I know a lot of guys are going to be asking about the welding hats for the different styles of welding hats. I get that question asked quite a lot on Instagram. Custom Beanies does have, this is not a custom beanie welding hat, but Custom Beanies does have those particular hats. And there's a couple different Castle Welding Supply and in Edson, Alberta. They do have on Instagram, and you can buy these particular hats.
The foot pedal is just to initiate the arc without having to move the torch around, without having to contaminate the weld puddle or the material that you're welding on. Yeah.
So what tells you how far down to have it pushed down? Because I know the further you push it down, the more, the more amperage you're
Usually you're gunning for about a 1/16 of an inch on either side, either bevel tip. But right now I have probably a 32nd of about a 32nd that I can see a keyhole, so that's adequate enough because it does have fusion. Yeah, essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just removing any oxides or any contaminants that are on the weld zone, even if they're not created while welding. So this removes any oxides that are naturally forming to protect the material even though it's in the presence of the atmosphere, and this is cold to the touch. And this just removes the heat affected zone, weld zone. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just brushing the oxides off and any formation of an oxide that was left on the material. I'm brushing the weld zone and the heat affected zone. I'm also brushing the zone of where I am going to weld to remove those oxides on there too. Right now what I'm doing is I have gas and antifreeze on this towel, and I'm just cleaning the weld zone for any oils, impurities, oxides, anything left from the emery cloth, the hand brush, cleaning dust, soot, etc. Well, not soot, but dust or anything else. This also makes the weld zone very clean, antiseptic. And always be careful not to leave any residue from the any fibers from the cloth in the weld zone as well. And always inspect the towel and make sure it's all nice and shiny and clean. Alright, now what I'm doing is I'm cleaning the oxides off the ferrometal. And it doesn't matter whether this is titanium or stainless, duplex, super duplex, nickel alloys. It's basically the same thing, you're just removing oxides, because the oxides within the molecular structure contain oxygen, which the oxygen on the oxides is going to interact with your weld puddle as the weld puddle elevates in temperature, and the material is going to try and protect itself away from the atmosphere, which forms more oxides. Now this is gas and antifreeze. I'm just removing anything that even the emery cloth left. You want the filler metal antiseptic. Nice and clean, so it's very clean antiseptic metal that's being added to the weld puddle. Okay, essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just adjusting the trailing shield. Now titanium, you don't have to weld it with a trailing shield. You can weld it with a single ceramic cup, and every ripple that you create you protect away from the atmosphere. But since it's easier, more convenient, and you can produce a higher quality weld with a trailing shield on, I'm using a trailing shield. Therefore I'm just adjusting it so that I don't have the trailing shield offset, so maybe it's like this where it lets a lot of air and atmosphere in here, and I want it where I have the trailing shield, everything, as long as this material is hugging the pipe, and I have a nice atmosphere enclosed within here, because this is backing gas internally in here. Probably about there. There we go. So while I'm welding normally, it should have everything enclosed. And also the other thing is make sure that the tungsten is sharp and doesn't have any oxidization on the tungsten itself, and there's no contamination of the tungsten, and that the tungsten is not touching the weld puddle while welding.
And also, for when it comes to the welding techniques, I've always found that essentially what is going on here, but if you do record yourself while welding, you can play back. That's what a lot of sport players, a lot of boxers, a lot of different football, thank you, a lot of different football, boxing, hockey, that's what a lot of players do, is they will record themselves and play back and watch for body positioning, where they've been. And I found that actually uploading to Instagram and recording myself weld, it makes a person a lot better, because they can see their body positioning, they can see their hand movements, they can see a correct or incorrect welding technique, positioning, line of sight. Now if you look at the Huntington trailing shield, there's a slight gap at the top of the pipe. It's still hugging the pipe as best as possible, but sometimes you have to be very conscientious. There is that L bracket that holds the ceramic cup. We bent that a little bit so that our torch would be more perpendicular to the pipe, and that would allow the trailing shield to hug the pipe closer. At the moment I'm wearing a shade 8 lens. Wearing lighter shade lenses allows you to see different parts of the weld a little bit better. You can use shade 8. Some welders, the shade 8 is bright. It's what your eyes adjust to. It can be nice for seeing more of the pipe and seeing, you can see coloration, especially in carbon and stainless. You can see different colors in the arc. Sometimes it is rather glossy. You can use a shade 9. For pipeline, for running beads, it's also very nice for a shade 8 lens. On aluminum is very, very glossy. For the aluminum videos, using shade 8 for the root pass, but jumped up to shade 10 and shade 11 to remove a lot of the gloss and glare. Also with the welding gloves, we have white welding gloves, but even oil from the leather, as they are animal hide, the oil from the leather can contaminate the different materials. The oils eventually get onto the filled metal. The filled metal is fed into the pipe, the weld puddle.
But this right here is the tie-in. Tie-in at 12 o'clock. So we're going down the left-hand side. So this is the left-hand side. So the weld is over here, and this is the mirror. That's the tie-in at the bottom. This is the right-hand side. This is coming up the right-hand side. Back with the tie-in at the top. This is the tie-in at the top.